A lone figure in silver Beskar armor stood watch over the silent desert plains of Navarro. The twin moons hung low on the horizon, bathing jagged rocks and sand in a pale glow. Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, listened to the night wind while his small companion, a green child named Grogu, dozed in a sling at his side. For once, there was peace. No bounty to chase, no enemy on their trail. Only the crackling of a distant campfire and the rustle of desert creatures disturbed the stillness. That peace shattered without warning. A sharp crack split the air like lightning without a storm. Din's hand shot to his holstered blaster as Grogu awoke with a start, wide eyes reflecting an eerie light rising ahead of them. In the middle of the barren flats, empty space began to twist and tear. A shimmering rift opened in the fabric of reality itself, a swirling vertical pool of white and violet light crackling with energy. The Mandalorian lifted his helmet's rangefinder, adjusting its sensors to analyze this impossible phenomenon. His HUD danced with readings spiking off the charts, radiation, electromagnetic flux, frequencies he had never seen before. Grogu whimpered softly, sensing something strange. Din gently rested a gloved hand on the child's head in reassurance, though his own heart pounded beneath his armor. This was beyond any Imperial trick or known technology. It felt wrong, as if nature itself recoiled around the glowing tear. Slowly, Din approached the anomaly, rifle now drawn and braced at his shoulder. The air around the rift was hot and ionized. Sand grains levitated, swirling into geometric patterns as if caught in invisible hands. The very molecules of the desert seemed alive, dancing to an unseen tune. Grogu peered out from behind Din's leg, his ears twitching at the unnatural hum. Suddenly, a figure was flung out of the light. Din halted. A man's silhouette tumbled onto the sand with a heavy thud, illuminated by the dying glow of the rift behind him. An instant later, the light imploded with a thunderous pop, and as quickly as it had appeared, the portal was gone. The night fell dark and quiet again, leaving only the soft moans of the newcomer and the sizzle of glassed sand. Din kept his rifle trained as he edged closer to the fallen figure. Through his visor's low-light filter, he saw a disheveled man in scorched, tattered clothes sprawled on the ground. The stranger's hair was dark and thinning, his face etched with a long scar that caught the moonlight. He looked terrified and dazed, chest heaving as he gulped the cool desert air. Fine wisps of smoke clung to him, as if he had been burned or shocked. Grogu stepped forward curiously, but Din gently guided the child behind him. "Stay back," the Mandalorian warned in a low, modulated tone. He didn't know who or what this man was, but the bizarre entrance left him wary. "Identify yourself," Din called out firmly. The man on the sand groaned and pushed himself to hands and knees. When he looked up at Din, his eyes were wide with confusion and lingering panic. "Where?" he croaked, voice dry and cracked. "Where am I?" He had an accent and tone unlike any Din had heard in the galaxy. Din didn't lower his weapon. "You're on Navarro in the Outer Rim. How did you get here?" he asked. At the mention of Navarro, the stranger's brow furrowed. Clearly, the name meant nothing to him. I don't know," the man stammered. He glanced over his shoulder at the now empty air where the rift had been, then back at Din's imposing armored form. "There was an accident. I was somewhere else. Then a portal." His voice caught as he struggled to make sense of it. He looked down at his hands, turning them over as if to confirm he was solid. "This can't be real," he whispered shakily. Din's finger hovered near the trigger, but the man's genuine bewilderment gave him pause. This was no Imperial trooper or armed bounty. He looked more like a lost traveler, albeit one who had stepped out of thin air. Grogu peered around Din's leg again, eyes blinking in curiosity at the newcomer. The man noticed the small creature and managed a weak, incredulous smile. That child," he murmured. "He looks like Yoda." The last word was uttered with astonishment, as if the man recognized Grogu's species from some half-remembered story. Grogu made a soft cooing sound at the familiar name, perhaps recognizing it. Din frowned beneath his helmet, surprised by how this stranger could know of Yoda, the legendary Jedi Master. "Who are you?" he demanded, keeping his blaster trained steady. "Are you Jedi?" The scarred man let out a short, bitter laugh at that. "Jedi? No, I'm no Jedi," he said, coughing from the smoke still curling off his clothes. He sat back on his heels, raising soot-stained palms in a placating gesture. "My name is Owen Reese." He swallowed, still regaining his breath. People in my world sometimes called me the Molecule Man." Din exchanged a glance with Grogu, who merely tilted his head. The Mandalorian had heard many self-styled titles, warlords, crime bosses, even Moff Gideon with his grandiose airs, but Molecule Man was new. "I'm Din Djarin," he introduced cautiously after a moment. "This is Grogu." At his name, the child gave a little wave of his three-fingered hand. Din slowly lowered his rifle, though he stayed alert. "You said your world. You're not from this planet, not even from this galaxy." Owen shook his head and struggled unsteadily to his feet. Din noticed he stood with a slight hunch, as if carrying a heavy weight on his thin shoulders. "Not a ship, another universe," Owen said quietly, eyes haunted. "One moment I was in New York City, and the next I was," he gestured weakly at the desert around them, "wherever here is, Navarro, Outer Rim, none of that means anything to me." Din's mind raced. Another universe. Perhaps this rift had been some kind of wormhole or hyperspace anomaly bridging two realities. He had never heard of such a thing outside of armorers' fables for foundlings, tales of ancient sorcerers and gateways between worlds. The practical part of him resisted believing it, but he'd just seen a man literally fall out of empty air. The evidence crackled in the static still dancing across his visor's sensors. Owen swayed, and Din stepped forward to catch the man's arm, steadying him by sheer instinct. Through his glove he could feel Owen's arm trembling. "Easy," Din muttered. The stranger was clearly exhausted and disoriented. "Not an immediate threat. We have a fire and water at my camp. Come on." With the adrenaline of the encounter fading, Din guided Owen Reese the few paces to where his small campfire smoldered among rocks. Grogu toddled alongside, still eyeing the newcomer with equal parts fascination and caution. Owen looked around at the alien night sky dotted with unfamiliar stars, his expression equal measures awe and fear. They reached the fire, and Din retrieved a spare canteen from his pack. He offered it out. Owen hesitated, perhaps unsure if the water was real or safe, then accepted and drank greedily, coughing between gulps. "Thank you," he rasped, wiping his mouth. He lowered himself to sit on a flat rock near the fire, staring into the embers as if grounding himself in this reality. Din also sat, across the fire from Owen, and placed Grogu on his knee. The child, now more curious than afraid, chirped softly at Owen. The man managed a gentle smile at the little one, wiggling his fingers in a small wave back. For an instant, Din saw a kindness in Owen's eyes, a fragility even, that belied the cosmic event of his arrival. "Do you know what caused that portal?" Din asked after a moment, voice level. "You mentioned an accident." Owen closed his eyes as if the memory pained him. "I was trying to fix something in my world, a crisis. My powers sometimes they interact strangely with cosmic energy," he explained haltingly. "There was an ancient device that a villain was using to tear holes in reality. I attempted to contain it, but instead," he glanced over his shoulder in the direction of the vanished rift. "I must have been caught in the effect. I'm not sure if it was that artifact or my own abilities, but I ended up punching through dimensions." His voice grew softer, guilt creeping in. "It wouldn't be the first time my power caused a disaster." Din studied Owen in the firelight. The man's face was etched with weariness and regret. Beneath the grime and scar, he appeared as an unassuming, middle-aged human, not a warrior or a sorcerer by outward looks. It was hard to imagine this tired soul, holding enough power to breach entire universes. Yet the evidence sat right before him. Grogu cooed and reached out with one tiny hand toward Owen's knee, as if sensing the man's distress. Owen looked down at the child's green, wrinkled face, gently patting him. A tremulous breath escaped Owen's lips. "He's not afraid of me," Owen whispered, almost in disbelief. Din's voice was gentle but firm from behind his visor. "Why would he be afraid of you?" Owen lifted his gaze. In the flickering light, unshed tears made his eyes shine. "Because I am dangerous," he said, voice raw. "Because everyone around me is at risk when I lose control." He swallowed hard. "You saw how I arrived. That tear in reality, it's a fraction of what I can do. I've tried to contain it, to live a normal life, but my past is full of times I failed." Din remained silent, letting the man speak. He had encountered those with incredible abilities before, Jedi like Ahsoka Tano, but they usually carried themselves with confidence and purpose. Owen Reese spoke with the anguish of someone burdened by his own gifts. "I have the power to control matter itself," Owen continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Every molecule, every atom, I can rewrite the world at will." He looked at his hands with a mix of fear and loathing, and for a time, I did. I became something terrible, someone I hardly recognized. I've hurt people. His scarred face tightened as a dark memory washed over him. I once came close to destroying my entire world. All it took was a moment of pain and anger, and I could have erased everything. Owen's hands began to tremble anew. Grogu gurgled sympathetically and nuzzled against Din's chest. Din gently stroked the child's long ears, his mind reeling at Owen's revelation. Control matter, rewrite the world. He had witnessed Jedi Masters move starships with the Force, but even they had limits bound by the living energy of the galaxy. This sounded like an ability beyond even myth, more akin to a god from old Mandalorian legends. Yet here that god sat across the fire, head hung in shame. Din broke the heavy silence, carefully choosing his words. "But you didn't destroy your world, did you?" he said quietly. "You stopped yourself." Owen gave a shuddering sigh. "Not alone. Someone I cared about reminded me who I was. Not a god, not a monster, just a man. I pulled back at the last second." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "After that I promised myself I'd never lose control again. I sought peace, isolation. I thought if I stayed away from trouble, from people, I couldn't hurt anyone." A bitter smile tugged at his lips. "I see how well that worked out." Din nodded slowly, understanding creeping in. "You were alone when this accident happened." "Yes," Owen replied. "I was trying to fix things by myself. I thought maybe for once I could be the hero without—" He trailed off, eyes unfocused on the flames. "Without the collateral damage." He clenched his jaw. "Instead I'm here, in another universe entirely, and I have no idea how to get back. I don't even know if my world is safe now, or if I made things worse by disappearing." The Mandalorian felt an unexpected pang of empathy in his chest. Despite the outlandish circumstances, Owen's despair was unmistakable. Din had seen that look before, in refugees who lost their homes, in fellow foundlings who had seen their families killed. It was the look of someone unmoored, guilty for surviving when others did not. Grogu, sensitive to emotions, whimpered softly. Din adjusted the child on his knee, then spoke in a calm, measured tone. "Listen, Owen. You're not alone right now. We'll figure something out. I have friends in the nearby settlement. One of them might know about the artifact site you came through. Maybe it left some trace or equipment we can use." Owen looked up sharply. No, I can't be around a lot of people," he blurted. The mere idea clearly alarmed him. "You don't understand. If I have an episode, things could happen. Terrible things. I should stay away from any town." Dine raised a gloved hand reassuringly. "Navarro's settlement is small, and the people there are tough. They've seen their share of trouble. Trust me, they've already lived through Imperial occupation and worse. We can handle ourselves." He stood, settling Grogu into the crook of one arm as he extended his other hand toward Owen. "More importantly, you need rest and proper shelter. The desert night gets cold, and wandering Imperials or raiders won't be as understanding as me if they find you first." Owen gazed at the Mandalorian's outstretched hand, still hesitant. Why are you helping me?" he asked in a tentative voice, as if the concept were foreign. Dine's helmet tilted slightly. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply, "and because I was tasked once to take care of a child with extraordinary abilities." He nodded at Grogu, who blinked up at Owen innocently. "It taught me not to judge someone solely by what they can do, but by what they choose to do." Owen considered that, eyes flicking between the armored warrior and the tiny child who looked at him with such trusting curiosity. Finally, with a weary nod, he accepted Din Djarin's hand. The Mandalorian pulled him to his feet. "Thank you, Din," Owen murmured. It had been a long time since a stranger had shown him kindness without fear or strings attached. He intended to deserve it. Grogu wriggled and reached his arms toward Owen. Din allowed the child to hop from his grasp into Owen's hesitant embrace. The man held Grogu gingerly, as if afraid he might break or be broken by the little creature. But Grogu merely cooed and nuzzled into Owen's chest, a warm weight of unconditional acceptance. A shaky smile tugged at Owen's lips. In that moment, with a child in his arms and an ally at his side, he felt something unfamiliar: hope. By the time the trio arrived at Navarro's main settlement, dawn was breaking over the desert cliffs. The rising sun painted the sky in stripes of copper and rose. Owen walked beside Dine's hoversled in stunned silence, marveling at the alien landscape in the new light. Basalt spires and old lava fields ringed the town ahead. He could make out low adobe buildings and the glint of a domed structure at the center. Smoke curled from a few chimneys as the town stirred to life. As they passed through the outskirts, a pair of armed sentries, members of the local militia, straightened in surprise at the sight of the Mandalorian and an unfamiliar civilian. Dine raised a hand in greeting, and they nodded respectfully, recognizing the armored guardian who had helped liberate their town from Imperials months ago. Owen hunched his shoulders and kept his head down, conscious of every curious gaze from townsfolk starting their day. He cradled Grogu protectively, the child now dozing again. Dine noticed Owen's uneasy expression and spoke quietly. "We'll head straight to the High Magistrate's office. He's a friend." "High Magistrate?" Owen asked, the term pulling him from his anxious thoughts. "Grief Karga," Dine clarified. "He runs this town. We go back a ways." Dine considered warning Owen to hide any display of his powers, but one glance at the man's pale, nervous face told him it wasn't necessary. Owen looked as though he'd rather disappear than draw any attention. They made their way down the main thoroughfare, passing a courtyard where merchants were setting up stalls of exotic fruits and smoked meats. A couple of children chased a rolling repulsor toy, giggling as it zigzagged magically on its repulsor lifts. The normalcy of the scene further unsettled Owen, who perhaps expected stares or hostility. Instead, aside from a few polite nods at Dine, the townspeople paid them little mind. Life here had enough strange turns that one more stranger didn't raise alarm, especially in the Mandalorian's company. At last they reached the steps of a sturdy building marked by a prominent mythosaur skull sigil above the door, an old Mandalorian symbol now adopted by Navarro's new leadership as a tribute to their protector. Dine led Owen inside. The cool interior was lit by morning sun through high windows, illuminating a spacious office with wooden desks and shelves of scrolls and datapads. A deep voice echoed from an adjacent chamber. "Well, if it isn't Mando, back from the wilds." And with a guest, Grief Karga emerged, draped in a rich burgundy robe embroidered with gold, a far cry from the rough-and-tumble guild agent he'd once been. His grizzled beard split into a broad smile at seeing Dine, but his eyes quickly fixed on Owen, taking in the man's haggard state and the sleeping child in his arms. "Welcome back, my friend," Grief said warmly, though curiosity laced his tone. "We weren't expecting you so soon. Who is this you've brought with you?" He stepped forward, ever the gracious host, and extended a hand to Owen. Owen carefully shifted Grogu back into Din's care and accepted the greeting. "Owen Reese," he said softly, still overwhelmed by the formal welcome compared to his dramatic arrival only hours ago. "Molecule Man," Din added matter-of-factly. At least that's what he's called where he's from. Din gently settled the now snoozing Grogu onto a plush cushion in the corner, then turned to Grief. He's not from around here, Grief. Not even from our galaxy. We had an incident last night. Grief's eyes widened. He gestured for them all to sit around a circular table. Another incident. You sure know how to find trouble, Mando. There was a light jest in his voice, but also genuine concern. As Owen and Din took seats, Grief lowered himself into a high-backed chair, hands clasped on the table. Tell me everything. Din recounted the night's events succinctly, the sudden rift in the desert, Owen's appearance, and the basics Owen had shared about his abilities and being from another universe entirely. Grief listened in astonishment, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement to a kind of wary respect as the story unfolded. Owen, for his part, remained quiet, occasionally fidgeting with a loose thread on his singed sleeve. It was clear he was uncomfortable being the focus of discussion. When Din described Owen's power over molecules, Grief raised an eyebrow. Control matter and energy? You mean like the Jedi and their force tricks? Din shook his head. More. He doesn't just move things with his mind, he can change them into other things. He glanced at Owen, encouraging him to elaborate. Why don't you show him something small, a harmless demonstration? Owen looked between them nervously. The last thing he wanted was to put on a spectacle, but he also sensed the unspoken need to prove the truth of Din's words. With a hesitant nod, he reached for a simple metal goblet sitting on Grief's desk. All right, just a small example, Owen murmured. He held the cup in his hand and took a slow breath. Din and Grief watched intently. At first, nothing visible happened. Then the goblet began to shimmer. The dull metal rippled like liquid. Grief gasped as the cup's shape wavered, and then transformed into a living flower. Owen now held a rose-like blossom, its petals a delicate coppery hue, metal transmuted to organic matter. Grief Karga's mouth hung open. He gingerly reached out and touched the petal. It was soft and fragrant, dewy with nectar. Incredible, he breathed. Owen set the metallic rose on the table, and as he released it, the bloom gradually crystallized back into solid metal, clinking on the wood. The transmutation faded as easily as it had come. Grief blinked rapidly, and then let out a booming, astonished laugh. Ha, Mando, you certainly know how to find the most interesting friends. I've never seen anything like it. Not even the Jedi could conjure a thing into existence like that. His tone was odd, but Din caught a flicker of trepidation in the older man's eyes. As leader of a growing community, Grief understood the double-edged sword of such power appearing in their midst. Owen closed his hand under the table to hide a slight tremor. Even that trivial use of power made him anxious. Memories of when he'd used it destructively lurked at the edges of his mind. That artifact site you mentioned, Din said to Grief, steering the conversation to practical matters. Are there any records of unusual devices or Mandalorian tech out in the northern flats? Maybe from the old covert or earlier settlements. Grief tugged thoughtfully at his beard. Navarro's history is patchy. Mandalorians did have a hideout here, but nothing like what you described. If an ancient relic caused this rift, it's news to me. He rose and walked over to a shelf, pulling out a dusty regional chart. Spreading it on the table, he traced a finger across it. You were camping near the northern lava flats, yes? There are ruins around here. We thought they were just leftovers from an abandoned smuggler outpost, but perhaps, he tapped the map, some prospectors mentioned odd magnetics and lights out there recently. I assumed it was leftover Imperial mining equipment misfiring. Din leaned over the map, his visor following Grief's finger. That's exactly where we were. He looked to Owen. The portal might have been triggered by something in those ruins. If we can figure out what it was, maybe I can go home, Owen finished quietly. He stared at the map with a mix of longing and dread. Home, his world. He still didn't know if it remained intact, but at least trying to return was better than being a dangerous anomaly here. Grief nodded firmly. We'll help you, my friend. Navarro owes the Mandalorian many favors, and any friend of his is a friend of mine. He clapped a hand on Owen's shoulder in camaraderie. Owen flinched slightly at the sudden friendly weight, unaccustomed to such easy acceptance. Grief's gaze softened as he sensed the man's unease. You'll be safe here. Rest up today. We'll send a team to survey those ruins for that artifact or any clues. Thank you, Owen said, voice filled with genuine gratitude. I don't know how to repay. Nonsense. Grief waved off the notion magnanimously. Just get yourself home safe when we figure this out. Consider it Navarro's good deed for an otherworldly traveler. He grinned, then eyed the now sleeping Grogu. We should all get some rest. By the look of you, you haven't slept in ages, Owen. That was true. Owen felt bone-tired, the emotional toll of crossing universes catching up now that immediate fears had eased. He was safe for the moment, among people who strangely did not fear or shun him. It was more comfort than he'd expected to find. Din agreed. There's a spare room here in the offices. It's secure and quiet. Get some sleep. We'll regroup at midday. He was already gently scooping Grogu into his arms. The child snuggled against his chest plate with a content sigh. Owen stood, offering a weary smile. I will, thank you both. He paused, then added earnestly. I truly appreciate what you're doing. I know trusting me is a risk. Din regarded him silently for a moment, then spoke in his steady way. Everyone deserves a chance. You've done nothing to betray our trust. Behind the modulator, his tone softened. You're a long way from home, Owen. Rest. We'll
We'll sort this out together." As Grief Karga led Owen Reese to a small adjacent chamber with a simple cot, Owen felt the weight on his chest lighten slightly. For the first time in a very long time, he wasn't facing the darkness alone. Surrounded by these unlikely allies, a hardened Mandalorian warrior, a kindly magistrate, and an innocent child, the Molecule Man allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find his way without unleashing the destruction he feared. In the stillness of the offered quarters, Owen lay down and closed his eyes. Exhaustion overtook him quickly, and as he drifted into a dreamless sleep, the molecules of the world around him remained quiet and undisturbed. Unbeknownst to the resting town, Navarro's sky had gained a new star in the early dawn, a small Imperial cruiser lurking just beyond the atmosphere. Within its cold gray corridors, remnants of the once mighty Empire scurried to obey their leader's commands. On the bridge, Moff Gideon stood with hands clasped behind his back, his dark cape falling in sharp pleats. His gaze was fixed on a holographic display showing a spiking energy reading over Navarro's northern deserts. "This was recorded 4 hours ago, sir," an Imperial technician reported nervously, pointing at the holograph of the anomaly's burst. "An intense energy surge, unlike any known Republic or Imperial device. We suspect it could be related to them." The technician glanced up, implicitly referencing the Jedi, or perhaps the elusive child that Gideon sought. Gideon's eyes narrowed. He had been tracking the Mandalorian's movements for some time, thanks to a covert beacon placed on the bounty hunter's old ship. Though the Razor Crest was now destroyed, Gideon had other means of surveilling Navarro. The Mandalorian had strong ties to this backwater, and now this unexplained event at the same coordinates, it was too much coincidence for the Moff's liking. "Have we intercepted any local communications about it?" Gideon asked in his low, precise voice.
"Yes, sir," replied a communications officer. "Magistrate Karga dispatched a survey team to some ruins at first light. They mentioned an artifact and a man who arrived mysteriously." She swallowed, double-checking the transcript as if hardly believing it. "They call him an otherworldly traveler and say he has great power." Gideon's lips curved into a thin smile. Power, a mysterious arrival. His instinct screamed opportunity. "Did they mention the child?" he inquired. "Not in the transmissions we decoded, sir." The Mandalorian and Karga seemed focused on the newcomer. The Moff paced a few steps, polished boots clanging softly on the deck. "Either way, this traveler and the child are likely together with our Mandalorian friend," he mused, thinking aloud. His voice then hardened with resolve. "Prepare a strike team. We will pay Magistrate Karga a visit and request custody of this newcomer. If he has such power, the Empire, the true Empire, must claim it." Within the hour, an Imperial shuttle streaked down through Navarro's clouds, flanked by a pair of screaming T-fighters. The craft landed just outside the town's perimeter, kicking up swirls of dust. Refugees and settlers looked up in alarm. The scars of the previous Imperial occupation were still fresh here, and the sight of stormtroopers in white armor now pouring out of the shuttle resurrected old fears. At Grief's office, Dine was reassembling his Ambon rifle after a morning check when he heard the distant screech of TA engines. He and Grief exchanged sharp glances. "Imperials," Grief hissed, striding to the window. His face fell as he spotted the unmistakable shapes in the sky. Din's blood ran cold. He immediately scooped up Grogu, who was nibbling on a small ration biscuit, and tucked the child protectively into his satchel. Owen had woken and was standing by the door, discussing the survey team's early findings with them. Now he froze, following their gaze to the window. Outside, townsfolk were scrambling for cover as an Imperial detachment marched toward the central square. Owen felt his stomach knot. "They're here for me," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Who else could provoke such a show of force on this remote world? He looked at Din with apology and guilt all over his face. "I'm so sorry. I've brought this on you." Din didn't waste time on blame. He tossed Owen a simple cloak Grief had given him earlier and motioned briskly. "Stay close to me. Grief, get your people to safety." Karga nodded, already grabbing a blaster from his desk drawer and strapping on his magistrate's badge. "My militia will hold them at the gates as long as possible. We can't let the Empire just trample in again." Despite the brave words, a vein of fear ran through his voice. They all knew how ruthless Gideon could be. They stepped out onto the street. The morning marketplace had erupted into chaos. Militia guards were ushering civilians indoors. A line of about 20 stormtroopers in formation was pushing into the main avenue, black-helmeted officers behind them barking orders. Din's keen eyes also caught a glint of something further back, an Imperial combat transport rolling forward to back up the troops with its heavy repeating blaster cannon. Leading the pack was Moff Gideon himself, striding with calm menace and eerie confidence in his posture. His gaze swept the street and settled on the trio emerging from the magistrate's office. "Mandalorian," Gideon called out, voice amplifying through a portable speaker carried by one of his troopers. "How fortuitous to find you here again. And High Magistrate Karga," his tone dripped with mocking politeness. "I do hope we are not interrupting your day." Din positioned himself slightly in front of Owen and Grogu, blaster in hand, but pointed down for now. Grief stepped up on Din's other side, chin raised in defiance. "Moff Gideon,
You are trespassing on an independent world under New Republic protection, Grief announced loudly, invoking the New Republic even though their presence out here was minimal at best. State your business and be gone. Navarro will not harbor Imperial fugitives. A thin smile ghosted over Gideon's face as he stopped a dozen paces away, his stormtrooper wall fanned out behind him. Come now, Magistrate. We both know the New Republic's grasp is flimsy in these parts. I am no fugitive. I am the law that still matters in this galaxy's shadows. Din's voice cut in, distorted by the helmet's modulator and thick with contempt. Your law died with the Empire. What do you want, Gideon? Gideon's eyes flicked to the green child peeking out at Din's side. Ah, I see the little one is as lively as ever. You've done well keeping him from me, Mandalorian. But today isn't about him. His gaze shifted to Owen, who stiffened under that predatory scrutiny. I hear you've acquired a new friend, one who came to you in quite a spectacular fashion. Owen looked between Gideon and Din, instincts screaming danger. Din growled low. If you know what's good for you, Gideon, you'll turn around. Navarro's been through enough. Gideon gave an exaggerated sigh. You misunderstand me. I'm not here to wreak havoc on your charming little town. The lie was evident. The stormtroopers leveling blasters at citizens contradicted his words. I am simply here for the traveler. An asset of tremendous power fell out of the sky and conveniently landed at your feet. I'm here to collect it. He addressed Owen directly now, voice almost gentle. Owen Reese, isn't it? Or shall I call you Molecule Man? The fact he knew Owen's name sent a chill through Owen's spine. The Imperials must have intercepted their communications. I represent the remaining legitimate authority in this sector. If you come with me, I promise you full resources to understand and control your abilities, perhaps even a way home. The Empire has knowledge beyond anything these Outer Rim savages can offer. Gideon extended a hand, as if inviting Owen to step forward. You would be treated well. No harm, no cages. We simply wish to help you, and in return you can help us bring order back to a chaotic galaxy. Owen's hands balled into fists at his sides. The man's tone was almost soothing, but Owen had been deceived by such silver tongues before. In Gideon's measured gait and hungry eyes, he saw an unsettling echo of another figure from his past, a cunning tyrant, who had once sought to use Owen's power for his own ends with honeyed promises. Never again. He's not going anywhere with you, Din said, stepping forward so that his armored bulk squarely blocked Owen from Gideon's view. The Mandalorian's posture was unwavering. Navarro is under our protection. You want him, you'll have to go through us. Gideon tutted softly as if disappointed. Why must you always choose the hard way, Mandalorian? He flicked a finger. Instantly, a half-dozen stormtroopers raised their rifles. The air filled with the high-pitched whine of charged blasters. A tense hush fell. Even the desert breeze seemed to hold its breath. Grogu whimpered and pressed himself against Din's leg, remembering all too well the terror of Imperial capture. Grief Karga scowled and drew his pistol. Around the square, a few of his militia, vastly outnumbered, took positions behind crates and market stalls, weapons aimed at the invaders. Owen's heart thundered in his chest. Fear spiked through him, fear not for himself, but for these people who had shown him kindness. He could see how hopeless the standoff seemed. Gideon's forces were better armed, more numerous. Navarro's citizens would be slaughtered if it came to a fight, and it would be because of him. No, he couldn't allow that. Owen suddenly stepped up beside Din, ignoring the Mandalorian's quick gesture to stay back. His voice rang out across the tense air. Moff Gideon, you want me? Fine. Just let these people go. Leave them alone and I'll come with you. Din turned his helmet sharply toward Owen. What are you doing? He hissed under his breath. Owen gave him a desperate, meaningful look. I won't have anyone die because of me. I'll go with him if I must. Gideon raised an eyebrow, clearly pleased at the apparent capitulation. He lifted a hand, signaling his troops to hold fire. There, you see, he called to Din and Grief. The man is sensible. Come, Mr. Reese. I assure you, in my custody you will be put to good use, and you might even find your way home, as I said. Owen took a tentative step forward, shoulders slumped in resignation and disgust at himself. A stormtrooper moved in with binders to shackle his wrists.
But before the trooper could touch him, Din moved like lightning. His hand flew to his belt, and a whistling bird launcher popped up. The tiny homing missiles gifted by the armorer. Cover! Din barked to Grief and Owen. In a flash, he fired. Several silver darts streaked out, corkscrewing through the air with shrill whistles. They struck the closest stormtroopers with pinpoint precision. 4 troopers dropped, their armor smoking where small explosions had pierced them. Chaos ignited. For Navarro, Grief roared, and the militia opened fire from cover. Red blaster bolts crisscrossed the square. Townsfolk screamed and ducked into doorways. Gideon cursed and retreated a step, drawing his own sleek blaster. Take them, he shouted to his troops. The remaining stormtroopers surged forward, unleashing volleys of crimson bolts toward Din and Owen. Din Djarin was already moving, a swirl of Beskar and determination. He pushed Owen down behind a water trough and triggered his whistling birds again, but the Vambrace chimed empty. He'd exhausted them. Switching tactics, Din popped up and fired his Amban rifle. A crackling pulse struck an Imperial sharpshooter on a rooftop, disintegrating the man before he could line up a deadly shot. Owen crouched low, adrenaline thundering in his ears. Grogu had scrambled from the satchel into the trough, peeking over the rim with wide, frightened eyes. Owen locked eyes with the child, and a calm resolve washed over him. He would not let this innocent come to harm, nor the man who had helped him. A trio of stormtroopers advanced on their position, firing relentlessly. Bolts sizzled against the trough and the wall behind it, sending shards of stone flying. Din stood resolute in front, his Beskar plating deflecting several shots, but one bolt caught the gap at his shoulder joint. He grunted as the blast scorched flesh beneath, dropping to a knee. "Mando!" Owen cried. An anger, hot and precise, flared within him. Without thinking, he thrust his hand out from behind cover. Invisible ripples radiated forward. The stormtroopers gaped as their blaster rifles suddenly disassembled themselves mid-shot, components falling apart into screws, power cells, and metal fragments. The troopers stumbled back in shock, left holding only empty rifle frames. Din glanced over and realized with awe that Owen had just done something extraordinary. Owen's eyes glowed with fierce concentration as he then curled his fingers slightly, and the scattered weapon components rose from the ground. With a sweeping gesture, he sent the debris hurtling at the disarmed troopers. A dozen pieces of metal and circuitry pelted them like shrapnel. They went down, armor dented and clattering. Greef's people cheered at the display and pressed the attack, taking out 2 more Imperials in the confusion. For a moment the enemy faltered, unnerved by an opponent who could snap his fingers and undo their weapons. But Gideon was not so easily cowed by the supernatural. He had, after all, dueled a Jedi. "Bring in the heavy," he barked. At his signal, the combat transport at the rear trundled forward. Its turret swiveled toward the main street, charging with a menacing whine. Din recognized the threat and shouted, "Down!" He threw his weight against the water trough, toppling it forward as improvised cover over himself, Owen, and Grogu. Just as the heavy cannon unleashed a torrent of green blasts, the front of Greef's office erupted in a shower of sparks and debris as the cannon strafed across it, blasting the facade to rubble. The water trough rattled and cracked under the onslaught, shielding the trio from the worst of it. Rubble rained down. Din hunched over Grogu, wrapping the child protectively in his cloak. Owen covered his head, heart hammering. The noise was deafening. As the cannon momentarily ceased fire to recharge, Din risked a peek. The street was filled with smoke and scorch marks. The transport's cannon was powering up for another barrage that would surely obliterate their flimsy cover. Owen's eyes narrowed at the hulking vehicle. This needed to end now. Slowly, he rose from behind the shattered trough, stepping fully into view amid swirling dust. Blaster fire from scattered troopers streaked toward him. Owen simply raised his palm, and the bolts themselves stopped mid-air before him, suspended in quivering halos of light. Gasps rose from friend and foe alike at the sight. With a flick of Owen's wrist, the halted energy bolts arced harmlessly upward into the sky. Moff Gideon's eyes widened. This was power beyond even his expectations. Owen exhaled and thrust both hands toward the transport. The ground beneath the tank shuddered violently. With a wrenching groan, the packed dirt and stone turned suddenly soft. The street became a quagmire of shifting grains. The heavy transport sank axle deep, its treads spinning uselessly as they were swallowed into the liquefied earth. Then, just as abruptly, Owen clenched his fists and the ground re-solidified like stone. The transport was trapped, half entombed, its cannon tilted upward away from the fight. Seeing their heavy support neutralized, the stormtroopers wavered. Some began to back away, fear evident even through their emotionless helmets. They had expected a simple pacification, not a battle with a demigod. Din rallied, taking advantage of their hesitation. Despite the burn on his shoulder, he leapt over the broken trough and fired his blaster with deadly precision. 1, 2, 3 troopers fell before they even realized the Mandalorian was on the offensive. Greef Karga stepped from cover to pick off a stormtrooper trying to flank from an alley. The remaining Imperials retreated toward their shuttle in disarray, dragging wounded comrades, but Gideon was not finished yet. Sneering at his troops' incompetence, he reached inside his cape and produced a small, rod-like device. Dinny's helmet HUD barely had time to flag the silhouette, a particle disruptor, a prototype weapon designed to scramble matter at the molecular level. Gideon aimed the disruptor at Owen's back and pulled the trigger, his face twisted with triumph. A cone of crackling distortion roared toward Owen, the air itself shrieking as molecules were violently agitated. This energy could tear any normal being apart. Owen felt the disruptive force lashing out and reacted in the span of a heartbeat. With one hand still raised toward the transport, he threw his other hand behind him and met Gideon's disruptor beam with an equal and opposite mastery. The very particles the device sought to scramble, Owen seized control of them. The disruptor's crimson beam struck an invisible barrier a few meters from Owen, splashing against it in a halo of red sparks. Gideon's weapon whined, straining against Owen's counterforce. Sweat beaded on Owen's brow. This weapon's energy was designed to unravel whatever it touched. Ironically, it was not unlike the cosmic accident that had first given him his powers. He gritted his teeth, channeling every ounce of will to contain the chaos. With a final surge, Owen absorbed the disruptive energy, nullifying the beam in a flash of red light. The particle disruptor gave a pitiful crackle and died in Gideon's hand. Gideon's triumphant expression faltered. He had banked on his secret weapon to subdue the man. Instead, Owen now stood at the epicenter of a scene of devastation, crackling energy dissipating around him like harmless static. "No more," Owen said, voice calm and cold. He clenched his outstretched fist. The particle disruptor wrenched out of Gideon's grip and crumpled in midair as if crushed by an invisible vice. Gideon stumbled back a step, eyes now truly afraid.
The last few troopers nearest Gideon raised their blasters desperately and fired at Owen. With a sweep of his arm, Owen deflected the shots into the ground. Then he twisted his open palm upward. The troopers yelped as they were hoisted off their feet, floating helplessly a meter above the ground. Their limbs flailed, blasters dropping from unnerved hands. Owen almost lost himself in that moment, the rush of having these oppressors at his mercy. He could end it right now. A single thought and he could crush their armor like tin cans. No, horror flooded him at the notion. He had sworn never to kill out of wrath again. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to let the troopers drop. They fell in a clatter of armor, scrabbling away on hands and knees, utterly broken in spirit. A few dozen yards away, 2 stormtroopers who had been manning the transport's cannon finally freed themselves from the stuck vehicle and came charging, only to skid to a halt at the carnage, comrades down or fleeing, Gideon on his back foot, and an otherworldly foe standing
untouched amid the chaos. They promptly threw down their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. Gideon saw his forces collapsing and uttered a snarl of pure hatred. He reached to his belt and produced a small spherical grenade, an implosion detonator. If he couldn't win, he would not be taken prisoner again. If I can't have that power, Gideon spat, then no one will. He armed the detonator and flung it toward Owen and Din's group. Time seemed to slow. The silver sphere tumbled end over end through the air, blinking rapidly and emitting a rising whine. Din's eyes widened. An implosion device of that size could vaporize half the street, friend and foe alike. But the detonator never reached the ground. Owen focused, and in the split second before detonation, he froze the device's internal mechanisms. The grenade halted midair, its blinking lights pausing. With a controlled motion of Owen's hand, the sphere imploded in on itself, a tiny flash as it collapsed into a harmless lump of inert metal. The deadly threat was nullified an instant before it would have exploded. Gideon's shoulders sagged, his final gambit thwarted. He found himself staring down the barrel of Din Djarin's blaster. The Mandalorian had closed the distance in a burst of jetpack flame, and now stood before the Moff, visor trained on him murderously. "It's over," Din growled. The Moff sneered even in defeat, but before he could retort, Greef Karga marched up, flanked by 2 militia fighters. "Moff Gideon, by the authority of Navarro, you are under arrest." Again, Greef's voice was triumphant. The militia roughly yanked Gideon's arms behind his back and slapped stun cuffs onto him. The once proud Imperial officer was dragged to his knees, breathing hard, eyes vacant with shock. All around, the battle settled into an eerie stillness. Wisps of smoke curled from burning scraps of Imperial equipment. A few wounded stormtroopers moaned, quickly being secured by Navarro's fighters. Some townspeople slowly emerged from hiding, gazing in awe at Owen Reese. Din immediately turned to find Grogu. The child was still in the overturned water trough, peering out with a quivering pout. Din rushed over and lifted Grogu out, checking him for any hurt. Finding none, he hugged the child tight to his chest armor. "It's all right, Adika," he murmured. Grogu whimpered and nuzzled into his protector. The Mandalorian then looked to Owen. Owen stood motionless in the center of the street, shoulders heaving with each ragged breath. The adrenaline of battle was draining, leaving behind a familiar dread. He surveyed what he had done. Twisted weapons littering the ground, scorch marks and upended earth, Imperial soldiers groaning in fear of him. And the worst part, a small part of him, had reveled in unleashing that power, though he'd restrained himself at the final moment. The fact that he almost hadn't was like a knife of guilt. Greef Karga approached Owen carefully, as one might approach a skittish beast. "Owen," Greef said, voice brimming with gratitude and a touch of caution, "you saved us. You saved the whole town. That was..." He shook his head in amazement, searching for the word, "miraculous." All around, the remaining militia and bystanders nodded and murmured agreement. Some even started to cheer for Molecule Man, but Owen barely heard them. His eyes were locked on one stormtrooper slumped against a wall, half encased in hardened earth up to his waist, groaning to be freed. Owen's stomach churned, a few degrees more of his anger, and that man would have been entombed alive. Another trooper lay unconscious, armor scorched and still smoking from where Owen had nearly boiled him in his suit, alive but badly injured. This was what he was capable of, not miraculous, monstrous. Din stepped forward, still cradling Grogu, and placed a hand on Owen's shoulder. The man was trembling. "It's all right," Din tried to assure him gently. "They forced our hand. You did what you had to do, and you did it without killing anyone." Owen looked at Din with haunted eyes. "Not this time," he said hoarsely. He gestured to the devastation. "But you see now, you see what I am. I nearly..." His voice broke and he turned away, unable to face the gratitude of the crowd that he felt he didn't deserve. I need to get away from here." Before anyone could stop him, Owen pulled up his hood and hurried down a side alley, away from the debris and the stairs. People parted to let him pass, a few reaching out to pat his arm or thank him, but he slipped by like a ghost. Within moments, he was gone from sight, heading out into the open desert beyond the town walls. Grogu whimpered, watching Owen leave so abruptly. The child wriggled in Din's arms, wanting to follow. Din's gauntlet-clad hand gently stroked Grogu's head.
"We'll check on him, don't worry," he whispered. He understood Owen's turmoil. After unleashing such force, the man likely feared himself more than any enemy. Grief exhaled, holstering his blaster. "Go to him, Mando. I'll handle things here." He glanced at the captured Moff being hauled to a secure cell. "Thanks to your friend, Navarro is safe again." Din nodded gratefully. He whistled for a nearby speeder bike. One of the militia had ridden in, swinging into the saddle with Grogu secured against him. The Mandalorian gunned the engine and sped off in the direction Owen had gone. As the dust settled on Navarro, the townspeople began to truly process what had occurred. Many would speak of the strange visitor with the power of a god who defended them. Some would later embellish it into legend, how the Mandalorian and the Molecule Man stood against an Imperial remnant and prevailed. But Owen Reese cared nothing for glory. All he felt was the weight of what he might have done, and the fear that next time he would cross the line he had sworn never to cross again. Evening fell over the northern flats with a hush of wind through ancient stone. The ruins that crouched there were humble remnants, a collapsed archway bearing faint Mandalorian clan marks, a few half-buried walls outlining what might have been a small stronghold centuries ago. Scattered about were broken pieces of machinery and the charred remains of a strange cylindrical device, likely the artifact that had interacted with Owen's power to tear open the reality. Faint scorch marks on the ground still traced where the rift had formed. Owen Reese sat on a block of stone within what had been the foundation of an old hall. Twilight cast long shadows, and overhead the first stars began to emerge in the indigo sky. He stared blankly at a shard of the shattered device in his hands. Its design was foreign, runes etched along a cracked crystal surface. He turned it over and over without really seeing it, his mind lost in a familiar storm of remorse. How many times had he found himself like this? Surrounded by the fallout of his own abilities, reeling from the aftermath of power unleashed. Too many. His mind replayed today's confrontation on an endless loop. The moment he stood and faced the troopers, the surge of energy that answered his anger, the terror in their voices as he played with reality. And worse, the small dark thrill deep inside him when he'd let loose. It was intoxicating for that briefest instant, to give in to what he could really do. That was the part that scared him most, that some part of him wanted to unleash it. He closed his eyes, feeling the sting of tears he refused to let fall. Quietly, almost in prayer, he whispered to the empty ruins, "Why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just be?" As if in answer, the crunch of footsteps echoed off the stone behind him. Owen didn't startle. He half expected who it would be. Turning slightly, he saw Din Djarin approaching slowly, helmet gleaming in the blue dusk light. Grogu was tucked in a sling at Din's hip, the child's eyes fixed on Owen with worry. The Mandalorian deliberately made noise as he walked, a courtesy to announce his presence to someone deep in thought. He stopped a respectful few paces away. "I figured I'd find you here," Din said softly. Owen managed a weak smile and turned back to stare at the ruined stone floor. "I'm sorry," he replied, voice low. "I didn't mean to run off. I just couldn't." He took a shaky breath. "I couldn't face them after what I did." Din took a seat on a fallen pillar opposite Owen, the armored plates of his gear clinking as he settled. For a moment neither spoke. The sounds of the desert evening, a distant howl of a creature, the whisper of the wind, filled the silence. Grogu squirmed, so Din set the little one down. Immediately, the toddler wobbled over to Owen and reached up insistently. Owen hesitated, then lifted Grogu into his lap. The child cooed and
snuggled against him, as if nothing at all were wrong. Owen felt a lump catch in his throat at that simple act of trust. "You know," Din began, his tone conversational but gentle. "This place, it was a Mandalorian outpost once, perhaps even a sanctuary. These stones have seen many battles." He glanced at the faint mythosaur engraving on a nearby fragment. Owen looked around them. In the dim light, he could indeed make out stylized skull motifs and script on some broken panels, the heritage of a warrior culture. "Your people's ruins?" he asked quietly. Din nodded. "An old song of my tribe says our kind leave pieces of ourselves wherever we go. It seems even here, on this quiet world, Mandalorians left a mark." He ran a gloved hand over a stone etched with the outline of a handprint. This might have been a gathering hall, perhaps a place where difficult choices were made. Owen managed a sad chuckle. "Fitting." Grogu looked up at him, ears perking at the sound of a laugh. Owen sighed and gently bounced the child on his knee. "You saw what happened back there, Din. I almost lost it. If you and Grogu hadn't been there, I might have done things I could never undo." Din studied the weary man before him. Even now, Owen held Grogu with infinite care, as if the toddler were a fragile treasure. It was hard to reconcile this gentle soul with the juggernaut who had sunk a tank and frozen laser bolts in midair, yet they were one and the same. "From where I stood," Din said slowly, "you showed incredible restraint for someone with the power to do anything. You stopped Gideon without killing him. You disarmed more than you destroyed. You could have done far worse, but you didn't." Owen shook his head, a fresh tear glinting as it traced the scar on his cheek. "Maybe, but I wanted to. For just a moment, I wanted to hurt them, Din. I felt that anger, and I let it drive me. I nearly crossed that line. I swore I never would again." His voice quavered, thick with self-reproach. That's what terrifies me. That deep down, I haven't changed at all from the man who once nearly brought down a city in his rage. Din leaned forward, resting forearms on his thighs. His helmet hid his eyes, but his voice radiated empathy. I know that fear, he said softly. Mandalorians are warriors by creed. We live by the blade, and we can die by it. There were times I wanted nothing more than to give in to anger, to take revenge on those who hurt my people, on those who hurt the child. He glanced at Grogu, recalling the boiling anger he'd felt seeing the little one in chains in Gideon's lab. But I was taught to hold the line. To fight, yes, but not become a monster in the process. It's a hard line to walk. Owen listened intently. Din rarely spoke this much about himself. How do you keep that line? He asked, voice almost pleading. After everything you've been through, how do you stop the hate from consuming you? Din was quiet for a moment, the question hanging in the cool air. At last, he answered, I had help. When I found Grogu, I had to become more than just a weapon. I became a protector, a father of sorts. That responsibility, it grounds you, makes you consider consequences beyond yourself. He gave a small shrug. And I have a code, my people's code of honor. It's not so different from what the Jedi follow, or what any good person tries to follow. It reminds me of who I am when the rage comes. He looked at Owen through the visor. You're a good person, Owen. The very fact that you're anguished right now proves it. A truly lost soul wouldn't feel guilt for showing no mercy, but you do feel it, even though those were Imperials who probably deserved worse. That's your code, whether you know it or not. Owen hung his head, gently rocking Grogu, who had begun to doze. In my world, after I nearly lost control, I isolated myself. I thought that if I just removed myself from any situation that tested me, I'd never risk hurting anyone again. He let out a hollow laugh. That plan clearly didn't hold up. Trouble found me anyway, here on this side of the universe. Din considered his words. He recalled something Ahsoka Tano had told him about Jedi teachings, about confronting fear. A wise friend once told me that denial of your nature can be just as dangerous as giving into it. The Jedi train their whole lives to confront fear and anger, not by running away from it, but by acknowledging it and letting it pass. Mandalorians, we temper our fighting instincts with discipline and purpose. Different approaches, same idea. You can't ignore what's inside you, only control it. Owen raised his eyes, meeting Dine's hidden gaze. I've tried so hard to control it, he said, yet it's always there. What if next time I fail? What if I go too far? Dine stood and walked over to Owen, then to the man's surprise, he unclasped his helmet and lifted it off. In the dim light, Dine Durine's face was calm and earnest, brown eyes steady. It was an immense gesture of trust from someone who almost never revealed his face. He placed a hand on Owen's shoulder. I can't promise you that you'll never struggle or slip, Dine said. No one can promise that. Not to a Mandalorian, not to a Jedi, not to you. But I do know that you're not fighting it alone anymore. You have people who care about you now, even in this short time. And if you need someone to remind you of who you are when you lose sight, you know how to reach us. He offered a small, kind smile. Owen was deeply moved. He gently shifted Grogu off his lap. Dine scooped the dozing child up and rose to his feet. Dine, I thank you, he stammered, emotion thick in his throat. Seeing the Mandalorian's face was something he sensed was rarely given. I won't forget what you and Grief and everyone here have done for me. You barely know me, but you gave me acceptance, a chance. Dine inclined his head. This is the way, he replied quietly, invoking the Mandalorian creed to emphasize that helping a foundling or a lost soul was simply part of his nature and duty. Owen managed a faint grin at that. This is the way, he repeated quietly, as if acknowledging that Dine truly understood him. Dine and Owen stood together in silence among the ancient stones, the decision between them made. Owen then retrieved the various fragments of the artifact, laying them in a rough circle in the dirt. The Mandalorian and the child stepped back a few paces to give him room. Owen inhaled and let his senses extend. He could feel the lingering exotic particles permeating the site. Whether one called it quantum flux or hyperspace residue or magic, it was all the same to his awareness. He had once opened portals himself back in his own world. Doing so intentionally here was risky, but not beyond his reach. The power within him stirred, but this time it was calm and controlled, guided by resolve. Blue-white light began to spark between the fragments, tracing invisible lines in the air. Owen closed his eyes, focusing with meticulous care. He found the metaphysical scar in space-time left by the previous rift, a weak point between dimensions, not yet fully healed. Now, with a careful exertion of will, he began to pry it open once more. Wind picked up around the ruins, whipping dust into spirals. Grogu awoke and gave a soft cry as static electricity charged the air, ruffling his hairs. Din rested a reassuring hand on the child's back, both of them watching in awe. A brilliant point of light flickered at the center of the fragment circle, then expanded, swirling outward into a circular portal 2 meters high. The air hummed with energy. Through the shimmering aperture, they glimpsed a hazy image of another world's skyline under night, flickering neon lights against darkness, perhaps a city street on Owen's Earth. It was like a window into a dream. Owen's heart pounded. The portal was stabilizing, anchored by his power.
He saw cars suspended mid-motion on the far side, as if time there was nearly frozen. It looked like New York City, home. With a final gesture, he held the portal open. The fragments of the device he'd arranged crumbled to ash, spent entirely to catalyze this miracle. The swirling gateway now hung on Owen's will alone. He lowered his hands, trembling from exertion and emotion. "It's open," he said, voice tinged with relief and bittersweet sorrow. Din stepped forward to Owen's side, Grogu cradled in one arm. The Mandalorian's cape flapped in the interdimensional breeze. He could see vehicles on the other side of the rift resuming motion, honking horns and bright billboards, an alien city compared to Navarro's dusty town. It struck him that for Owen this chaotic metropolis was home.
Owen turned to Din and the child. In the portal's glow, tears were visible in his kind eyes. "I don't have words to thank you," he said, voice thick with emotion. You gave me something I haven't had in a long time, hope, and a reason to believe in myself again." Din shifted Grogu gently and did something he almost never did. He reached out and pulled Owen into a brief embrace, patting his back. The hug took Owen by surprise, but he returned it gratefully, clapping Din's pauldron. They stepped apart after a moment. "Take care of yourself, Owen," Din said, earnest and firm. "And remember, if things ever become too much on your side, you have friends in this galaxy. We'll be here." Owen wiped his eyes and nodded. "I won't forget, ever." He looked down at Grogu, who was reaching for him and making unhappy babbling sounds. The little one clearly didn't understand why his new friend had to go. Owen smiled tenderly and stroked Grogu's ear. "Hey buddy, I have to go home now." Grogu whimpered, and to everyone's astonishment, the child levitated a small round stone he'd been clutching, one he picked up near Owen earlier, and dropped it into Owen's hand. Din's eyebrows rose. He hadn't seen Grogu use the Force to give something before. Owen opened his palm to see the smooth pebble. He recognized it as a piece of polished lava rock Grogu had found and played with at some point. A gift. Owen's composure nearly broke. "Thank you, Grogu," he whispered. He slipped the pebble safely into his charred coat pocket. "I'll keep it with me so I won't forget you, not that I ever could." Grogu gave a soft coo, ears drooping. Owen leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss atop the child's wrinkly green head. "You be good, okay? Listen to your dad." Dinna balanced Grogu on his hip and extended his forearm to Owen in the warrior's handshake of Mandalorian tradition. Owen clasped it firmly. They held each other's forearms in a strong grasp, a gesture of respect and brotherhood. "Oya Dinjarin," Owen said, using a Mandalorian word he'd learned from grief stories, meaning stay alive or cheers. It earned a faint look of surprise and a nod from Din. "Oya Owen Reese," Din replied. Under his helmet he smiled. "May the stars light your way." With that, Owen stepped back toward the portal's shimmering threshold. On the other side, a few astonished pedestrians in Manhattan were beginning to notice the strange circular window opening onto a desert ruin. No doubt their disbelief mirrored what Owen's had been upon arriving on Navarro. Owen took one last look at the Mandalorian and the child. Din raised his hand in a subtle farewell salute. Grogu managed a tiny wave of his paw, though tears brimmed in his big eyes. Owen felt a surge of affection and sadness. But this was right. It was time. "Goodbye," Owen said softly. With a deep breath, he stepped through the portal. His form shimmered, passing from the warm desert air into the crisp night of New York. For an instant they could see him on the other side, a man emerging into a bustling city street, headlights illuminating his figure. A few startled gasps were heard as he appeared in the middle of a crosswalk. Cars screeched to a halt. Someone shouted in confusion. Owen turned back for just a heartbeat, giving Din and Grogu a final wave from the other universe. Then, with a gentle sigh, the rift sealed shut. The circle of light contracted to a point and winked out of existence. The ruined outpost fell silent and dark once more. Din Djarin stood quietly, processing the emptiness left behind. Grogu sniffled and tucked his face against Din's neck. The Mandalorian rubbed the child's back soothingly as he replaced his helmet, the soft hiss sealing away his visage again. For a long moment, Din simply looked at the spot where the portal had been. A faint scorch mark and the ashes of the artifact fragments were the only signs that anything extraordinary had happened here. In the vast sky above, countless stars twinkled. Din wondered which one might shine over Owen's world. The galaxies, were full of wonders and challenges beyond imagining. And yet, in this moment, things felt a little smaller, a little more connected. Din lifted Grogu into the crook of his arm and began walking back toward the distant lights of Navarro. The night air was cool and still, carrying the scent of dust and faint smoke from the day's battle. He reflected on what had transpired. In Owen Reese he had seen both the peril and promise that great power held. The molecule man had the ability to unmake planets, yet he was as human as anyone, lonely, searching for purpose, afraid of failing those he cared about. It struck Din that even the mightiest needed compassion and understanding, perhaps more than anyone else. With a little faith and friendship, even a man who could reshape worlds had chosen to save one instead of harm it. Grogu looked up at the stars and babbled softly. Din glanced down at him. "I know Adika," he murmured. "I'll miss him too." The child gently tugged at the Mandalorian's cloak, seeking comfort. Din smiled under the helmet and pulled Grogu closer. Navarro's skyline of glowing windows and street lamps grew nearer.
The town was winding down after the turmoil. Din could imagine Grief already celebrating their victory and reassuring people that the danger had passed. Life here would go on, perhaps with a new tale to add to local lore. At the edge of the settlement, Din paused and cast one more glance over his shoulder, back at the empty desert expanse and the starlit ruins barely visible in the distance. He felt a quiet gratitude that fate, or the will of the Force, or whatever one might call it, had brought Owen Reese into his path. Their meeting had been brief in the grand scale of things, but the impact would stay with both of them. As long as he's out there, Din said softly, we'll share the same sky. In a way, Grogu yawned, small mouth opening wide, and settled into Din's arms, safe and content. The Mandalorian adjusted the sleeping child and resumed walking toward home. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. This galaxy had a way of constantly testing him, but he felt a renewed resolve. He had seen how trust and empathy could temper unimaginable power. It was a lesson he would carry, a reminder of why he followed the way. Above, the twin moons of Nevarro shone gently, and somewhere beyond them, across the gulf of realities, perhaps another moon shone over Owen's Earth. Two worlds, once connected by chance, now apart but forever changed by the meeting of a lone gunslinger and a lonely god. Din Djarin stepped through the gates of Nevarro, carrying Grogu, and a hush of respect greeted him. People nodding, some patting his shoulder as he passed. He acknowledged them quietly and made his way to the modest home that Grief kept ready for him whenever he was in town. Before he entered, Din paused and looked up at the night one last time. A shooting star streaked across the heavens, leaving a silver trail. The Mandalorian found himself hoping that somewhere, Owen Reese was looking up at his sky and seeing the same star, a silent message that both of them had made it through, and that neither truly walked alone under the endless expanse. This is the way, Din whispered, a vow to continue living by the principles that had guided him today. With that, he carried the sleeping child inside, the heavy door closing on the quiet, triumphant end of one chapter, and the promise of dawn on another. In the desert, the ancient ruins stood silent once more, but if those weathered stones could speak, they might tell of the night an impossible visitor arrived and departed, leaving behind not ruin, but hope in the form of lives saved and lessons learned about the strength of mercy. And that story would forever be etched in the song of the Mandalorian, passed down in hushed, reverent tones, the tale of the Mandalorian and the Molecule Man, and how in a galaxy of endless wars, compassion and restraint won the day.